Polska, what do you think makes a great place to live?
Right off the top of my head, guy, I would say weather. But I'm only saying that because I grew up in Canada where winters
Okay.
are long as fuck, cold as fuck. Like, dude, in Canada, it gets dark around, I would say 5:30, 6 o'clock for a few months. And it's cold as fuck all the time. It's like literally living in a goddamn freezer and you just can't escape. For people who haven't experienced it, it's horrible, dude. And year after year, and people actually suffer from seasonal depression, right? Because it's always cold and it's dark and it's horrible, bro. Like I hated it. Like every fucking winter, I would just be counting down the days until we would have nice weather again. Although I hated it, I will say it made you appreciate the nice weather a lot more. Like when May 24 comes around, like May, and it's like the first time you can go to the beach or, go to a cottage or something. Well, you can go to a cottage anytime, but you know what I mean? When you have like the
Yeah,
nice
yeah, yeah.
weather, everyone's just so amped up. Everyone's just having such a great time and everyone's just smiling ear to ear. It's a dope feeling, but I will say that it's not worth it because the winter is just too long. It's like almost 8 months long, bro. It's too
That is
much.
long. That's very long.
Yeah.
So you mentioned people's moods can be affected. Slight tangent. So that's actually called seasonally affected disorder, also or abbreviated to SAD. So the weather definitely impacts your mood and how you feel, and it's so much so that it's conveniently abbreviated to SAD. But that's typically what people experience when they're in places that are really cold or really dark, etc. So weather's a big one for you. You mentioned weather. Weather's a big one for me as well, like the weather and the climate. What else do you sort of think about or think that makes a good place to live?
I want to say purchase power, but it's not really purchase power. It's more what is the value of my Canadian dollar in other countries? Because I work online, so
Yep.
that I look at that, right? Like I get paid in Canadian dollars, so I look at, okay, where can I take my money and utilize it like optimally? Where can I buy cheap food? Where can I, buy a cheap house or rent? And where can I live like my best lifestyle with the with my income? Because to live in Canada with my current income, it's hurting. Like it's tough. You know what I mean? Like I can't do a whole lot with my current income. But where I'm living now, which is Colombia, the value of my money is essentially 5 times more than it is of
Wow.
that in Canada. So my purchasing power here is incredible. Like I can live a much more comfortable lifestyle, have better healthcare, eat better, do everything I want to do, just better,
Yep.
easier. And I have time for side projects. For example, this podcast, which we're doing, I wouldn't have the time to do this if I was living in Canada. It'd be a lot more difficult because you have to work a lot harder to have less in Canada in comparison to where I live now. But again, it only works that way because I get paid in Canadian dollars. Like if I was getting paid for the same job here in Colombia, that it'd be the same situation all over again, or even worse because Colombians, what's it called? Their wages are lower, like in comparison, and the purchasing power is lower.
The purchasing power of the currency that you get paid in, and that would sort of tie into because you're not getting paid in Colombia's currency, you're getting paid in Canadian dollars. You get greater purchasing power because of that, because of where you're choosing to live. So we would say that how far your dollar, or how far your money can go is important in the country. But if you're going to be earning in the native currency of the place you're wanting to live, you would ideally want to have some security there. Like you wouldn't want the currency to be inflating at a rapid rate, would you? You'd want economic security there. That if you're earning in the local currency, right? But because you're not earning in the local currency, that doesn't affect you so much in your decision as to where you would want to live. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, exactly. So there is a risk, obviously, buying a house here. because I mean, I don't think any economy is essentially stable today, or we can have complete trust in any economy. Just the way things are sort of looking, I could be wrong, but if we look at the value of the dollar, like it loses 7 or 8% each year, right? So if the dollar is still the currency of the world and is losing that much value per year, you can expect that the Colombian peso will lose even more value than the dollar does. So if you do buy a property in Colombia, you do run the risk of it devaluating if you wish to convert Colombian pesos back to dollars one day, right? But if you are expecting to just live in Colombia and retire here, I think maybe there might be less of a risk. But again, you have to factor in that Colombia is not a first world country. So it's not as stable per se as maybe some of the first world countries are. But then again, what does that even mean? Because look what's happening in France right now.
100,
right?
Absolutely. So we've gone climate, weather. We've gone the purchasing power of your dollar, or the security in the local currency, if you're going to be earning in that currency. But then if you're not earning in that currency, what's the purchasing power of the currency that you do earn in where you're living? That matters. And I think you just made a nice segue into the laws, the rule of law in the country, levels of corruption, or the amount of laws, the way that the laws are enforced. And it's interesting because, I think it might be, most people might think that more laws and more rules are better, but and less are worse. But I don't think that that's actually the case. I think that it's actually about a balance. So I'm not the sort of person that thinks that anarchy should rule. So I'm not let's not get rid of all the laws. Some are useful, some constraints are necessary, I believe, and they actually create the opportunities. But too many, and too many silly ones, especially, really inhibit the appeal of the country and what can be done within that country. So you and I wouldn't want to move to North Korea. I dare say you probably wouldn't want to move to North Korea. I'm probably not going to move to China. I don't think you would move to China. They seem to be a little bit, there's too many laws and regulations over there, and too much control from the governing body, the government. So it's interesting because trying to find a place that has a nice balance of that, right? Because there's a lot of countries that don't have much. Well, there's a few countries that don't have as much of a rule of law as some of the Western countries. And they might be a bit harsh. I couldn't see myself moving to Africa. I like the idea of visiting and going and doing that, but to me, from my perspective, which is very limited, right? This is not a gold standard. This is, take this with a grain of salt. But it doesn't seem to have there seems to be quite a lot of corruption and quite a lot of room for people to just essentially behave in ways that I would not want to be around, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And freedom is my third thing. I feel more free in Colombia than I do in Canada. And that might just sound absolutely crazy to people who are living in Canada, but I'm telling you, take the leap, move to another country for a little while, get to know it, and maybe you'll understand what I'm talking about. But living in Canada, I didn't feel the freedom I do here. And it is what it is. I felt the same way in Thailand. And I thought about this a lot, actually, where I would want to live. And my top two places would be Colombia and Thailand. If we're talking about the three things: environment, economy, and freedom. So that's what I narrowed it. That's what I would narrow it down to. And people will say, "Oh, well, Colombia is dangerous." Well, every country has its dangerous areas, right? And of course, Colombia might have more of those dangerous areas, and statistically, it's more dangerous. But I've been living the neighborhood I've been living in Colombia has been excellent. I know all of my neighbors. How many Canadians can say that today? Like I know the names of all of the people on my street, and I've done things with them. I play basketball with them. I know the people's names at the grocery stores I shop at. They know my name. There's a more sense of a community here, and I don't think you find that as much anymore in Canada as you did before.
Yeah.
So freedom, sense of community. There's a lot of benefits going to live abroad, somewhere other than Canada, America, Australia, certain places in Europe. And you just won't understand it. You just won't know it until you try it.